Good Wednesday afternoon to you. Welcome to the Jon Sanchez Show on News Talk 780 KOH. It's a pleasure to be with you on this happy hump day. So glad we're seeing light at the end of the tunnel. I am flying solo without Jason, but not flying solo altogether. It's a great pleasure to bring on my daughter, our marketing manager at Sanchez Gaunt Capital Management, my youngest child, Bailey Sanchez. How are you, my dear?
I am making it, Dad. How are you?
Same thing, honey. We're all making it. We're all making it.
Yep.
That's for sure. So good to have you. So good to have you. Well, the reason I brought Bailey on, I want to tell you what our topic is and then get into, of course, the stock market recap. So, folks, we cover a lot and we talk a lot on this program about non-farm payroll numbers. Tomorrow's Thursday. So we will, of course, get our Thursday state unemployment benefit filing numbers, etc. This is one of the areas, meaning the labor market. This is one of the areas that the Fed is looking at real closely to determine what they're going to do in the September meeting. Now, today we had the Fed minutes released, and there was a lot of chatter about the labor market cooling down. And I won't go into great details about the Fed minutes. It was pretty much everything that we thought they were going to say and, that we learned when they had their meeting a few weeks ago. But it got me to think, there's many of you that are, I don't know, Bailey, can I use the word middle age? I don't know. I don't think I can even say that. Probably older than middle age. You're like me. You're in your 50s and you're in your 60s. Let's just, whatever category we want to throw ourselves in, baby boomers, etc. So we're in our 50s, we're in our 60s. Labor market's starting to cool down. But imagine this situation. Imagine that you dedicate decades upon decades of your career only to face an unexpected layoff. That's right. We see this happen a lot with our clients. You're in your 50s, you're in your 60s, all of a sudden here comes that infamous pink slip. Well, this is much more devastating, as you would imagine, when you are in your 50s and 60s than if you were in your, say, 20s or 30s or even in your 40s, where you still have 20 to 30 years of working life left back in your career. So what we're going to focus on later in the program is this. What challenges do older workers face and how can they protect their financial future? So today we're going to explore a lot of aspects of losing your job later in life. We're going to discuss the emotional toll that it takes, the financial, the retirement planning hurdles, all of this, of course, being laid off later in life. Because once again, this is a unique challenge, much different than, again, if many of you have ever been laid off, and knock on wood, I never got fired. I've never been laid off in any of my jobs that I had before I was self-employed. So I don't personally know what it feels like, but I see it with clients. I see it, the look on their face. And like I said before, when it comes to retirement planning, shared this story a million times. Us men are the worst ones, right? We're the ones that have to mentally be ready to retire. We discussed that many times. The women, if they get laid off, I mean, especially during COVID, we had a number of clients, like, again, in their 50s and 60s, and the women were like, yeah, I lost my job. Now I get to stay home and be a housewife, something I've never been able to do. And so, we find ourselves in a situation where us men, where it's different. Maybe you're the primary breadwinner, maybe you're not. But us men, we tend to have much bigger egos than the spouses in our lives. So, like I said, if us men, we lose our job, no fault of our own, maybe, like we discussed on Mondays, maybe AI has taken your job. Who knows? But the bottom line is there's a lot of different things that go on as far as it throwing your life upside down, to say the least, right? You're not financially ready in most cases. You're definitely mentally not ready because, again, you still want to continue to work and have a good time and contribute to the family and do everything that us men want to do. But here comes the pink slip, as I said, and now you're out of a job and you're going, wait a minute here. I'm 55, I'm 60, I'm 65. Who in the heck is going to hire me? Well, we've got not only what the problem that we see going on right now, or really what potentially we could see going on as the labor market slows down, but more importantly, I never like to give you a problem without a solution. So we will be giving you solutions later in the program about what happens. What do you do financially, emotionally, etc., if you find yourself in that position? Jason, by the way, is tied up in meetings, so that's why he's not here today. But I wanted Bailey to join me because, Bailey, tell the audience your age, your position, and how this differs. You were the one that actually said, Dad, I want to join you on this subject because it's a lot different than it is for me, meaning yourself, versus, say, someone in my generation. So explain that real quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm 28. I'm a business owner. I also do marketing for you, of course, and a few other jobs. But I think my generation is so used to, and it's ingrained in us that jobs really aren't forever, especially we've seen all the economic downturns that you guys have had to go through growing up as a child. So it's normal for us not to think about being in one position our entire life. And it's very different for you guys, of course, because you hold a career for 30 years
Yep.
and that's your livelihood.
Yep.
So I think there's very two different views that we could touch on here and how to maybe prepare for it at an earlier age. So in case something does happen at an older age, you're already ready to take care of it.
You know, you bring up an excellent point. You bring up an excellent point where your generation is, it's almost like a badge of honor, right? To say, hey, I worked for this company for a year or two and that company for another. We just got a resume in our office just out of the blue. It appears to be a fairly young kid, very well credentialed, et cetera, that was interested in a portfolio management position. And I'm looking at his resume, Bailey, to your point, and it's like, man, I'm going to guess this kid's probably 24, 25 years old, but it's like, his current job, he only started in May and he's already looking for another job. And that's kind of the way his resume was. And I've seen that so many times in your generation where, like I said, it's almost like a badge of honor going, yeah, I worked here. I garnered some skills. I improved myself. Now I'm on to the next company and the next company and so on and so forth, where you're absolutely right. My generation, my gosh, I started my first, quote, W-2 job was with GMAC, the financing arm at that time of General Motors. And I thought, like you were just born and everything. And I thought, my God, I'm going to be here, 35 years. And, downside is I'd be retired right now because I started there very
Yeah.
young.
I
Definitely
remember
wouldn't
when
have
I
made
was
the amount of money as I do now.
14.
So yeah, completely different mindset.
Yeah, I remember sending in my first job resumes, and it was frowned upon to have too many jobs on your resume and making sure that you were there long enough, showing that you're a dedicated employee. And now you're
Exactly.
right, it does feel, in a sense, a badge of honor, which I think ties into many other things of how many things we try and put on our plate at this age and how many jobs. But yeah, it's almost like a badge of honor now with how many companies you've been with or jobs you've done.
Yeah. Yeah. What do you see real quickly? Then I want to get to the stock market update. What do you see with, I mean, you've been steady in your jobs for vast majority of your adult life, but what do you see with your friends in other careers and things? Is it devastating to them? Is it like, yeah, cool, I got laid off, or hey, cool, I quit and I'm going to go find myself, right? Your generation likes experiences. What's kind of the norm that you hear among your 20, 30-year-old, 20, late 20s, early 30-year-old friends?
I think it's a mix, but most people are like-minded like I am, where if something doesn't work out, I know that I can take my expertise and bring it somewhere else. But that is also the perks of being in marketing, of course. If I was in a specialized field, I think it would hit a lot harder
Yes, good point.
if I got laid off. So, but I do think people these days and kids my age, they're making themselves an expert in so many different realms, especially with ChatGPT and all these things at our
Yes.
fingertips. We can learn whatever we want in a week.
Yeah. Week, hours.
Yeah,
I just said it
absolutely.
on the show yesterday with Corey and Dwight along those points. We're talking about how it's hard for your generation and, well, just people in general to qualify for a mortgage now. And I was bringing up the point, and you've been with me your entire life, and you remember the sacrifices I made as a young broker. I mean, I was making $32,000 a year for my first, 3 or 4 years in the business. And remember, I would work on the weekends. I did landscaping. I did whatever it needed to be able to afford the mortgage and put food on yours and your siblings and your mom's table, and, on and on and on. And I don't see that a lot with your generation. You're very unique. I'm not including you by any means because you're much of a workaholic as I am. But they're not willing to make those sacrifices, right? It's like, hey, you know
Yeah,
what?
and I think
I enjoy my
too,
free time.
people are waiting way longer to have kids these days too,
Yes,
right? So
that's right.
that changes the whole realm of everything as well.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, there's a great article. Matter of fact, Billy doesn't know I'm even going to say this, but there's a great article today, WSJ, WallStreetJournal.com, talking about the exorbitant cost of daycare around this country. It's mind boggling. It's like, how in the world you better be making, you and your spouse combined better be making $300,000 or $400,000 to be able to afford a full-time daycare for one, much less two or three or anything else. And so you're right. Yeah, we faced that, again, when you were growing up, but not nearly to the cost of what it is now by all means. I mean, Bailey remembers a real funny, quick story. We were in Lancaster, or excuse me, in Bakersfield at that point. And, at that point we had 3 kids, right? Bailey was the youngest. And my wife and I at the time, we made that decision. I was a young broker again. I wasn't making anything, but I said, look these were the exact words I said to her. I said, look we cannot afford to send these kids to daycare anymore. So therefore, if as long as you're okay with it, you're going to be a full-time mom. And she's like, I'd love it. Right. And so I said, I will work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week to provide for our family, as long as you are home to take care of our kids. And again, we're not throwing money away and letting some stranger basically raise our kids. And was it hard? Oh my God, was it hard for a number of years. But like anything else, you somehow figure out how to do it, and you make it, and you look back and go, you know what, that was the best thing. I mean, I think that's why, not to brag as a parent, publicly, but I will. I think that's why you and your siblings are such great human beings and hardworking and honest and ethical and everything else, because your mom did a hell of a job raising you guys. You weren't shoved off to daycares and stuff like that. So I'm a firm believer, and I always encourage my clients, the younger ones, that in the event that they can do it, yeah, you're going to have to maybe sacrifice, but boy, is it ever worth it if you can indeed have a spouse stay home and take care of the kids if that's what you desire to do. So it's a tough decision, no doubt. All right, boy, we racked up that first session very quickly. So when we come back, we're going to get into the stock market recap. Very interesting day once again. A lot of things going on in the market, and then we're going to get to Bailey and get into our subject. What does a late career job loss look like? Let us turn it over to Kristen Snow in the Right Now Traffic Center. Hello, back to the Jon Sanchez Show on News Talk 780 KOH. Mr. Gaunt has the afternoon off. Not really. He's very busy in the office. So I asked my daughter Bailey, our marketing director, to join us. Bailey Sanchez. All right, let's get you the market information out of the way here, and then we're going to get into our topic. What does a late career job loss look like? All right, once again, just like the other 2 days of this week, just an absolutely wild ride on the Dow side of things. Just big sell-offs, big gains, big sell-off, big gains. Once again, all that matters is where we finished at 1 o'clock, and it looked like we didn't even budge. Just a 16-point rise, 44,938. NASDAQ came off the lows, down over 200, worst level, finished down 142, about a 0.67% loss. S&P lower by 16 points, or 0.24%. On the commodity side, oil prices rose 93 cents, 62.70 a barrel, $29.50 gain on gold to 3,388.40 an ounce. 10-year Treasury very quiet, down 1 basis point to yield a 4.36%. Now, the big headline of the day, really was our only major report, was the minutes of the Federal Reserve meeting, which occurred on July 29th and the 30th. And I want to just hit a couple of these because, again, this is why I wanted to talk about what happens if we lose our job later in life, if we're in our 50s and 60s. Because what the minutes, Bailey, from this Fed meeting showed is that the policymakers, they are really worried about the state of the labor market. They're worried about inflation, right? Although most agreed that it's too soon. I mean, we knew this. It's too soon for them to raise or to lower interest rates. Remember, you had 2 dissenters at that July meeting. So it really is a toss-up what the Fed's going to do in September. Now, the Fed future is still showing over an 80% probability. But remember, folks, we have what's called the Jackson Hole Symposium. Starts tomorrow. Fed Chair Jerome Powell is going to speak at about 7 o'clock, if I remember correctly, Friday morning. And that's where the street's looking for some hints as to where the Fed's looking at it. But these minutes really indicate that they're in no hurry. I mean, that's the bottom line, other than those 2 voting members that, again, we call the dissenters. So this labor market just keeps coming up more and more in regards to the Fed, factoring that in regards to what they're going to do as far as interest rates, et cetera. So that was one major headline. I mean, what's called PCE, or personal consumption inflation. That's the Fed's favorite measure of inflation. Headline number, again, for the month of June, year over year, up 2.5%. Remember, they want that down to 2%. Core PCE inflation, 2.7%. That was unchanged from a year ago. Service inflation slowed. Tariff effect. There's a lot of mention in the minutes about the tariffs and its impact. And once again, the Fed is finally slowly starting to come around, saying tariffs are going to have an inflationary impact on the economy, even though originally they said, no, they won't. And I criticize them for that. They see uncertainty about how personal tariff-related price increases will be. Unemployment right now, 4.1% for the month of June, slightly down. Payroll gains solid, but private job growth slowed. That one worries me, Bailey, because, as you know, the private sector is the job creator. They're the job engine of this country. It's not the government, it's the private sector. So seeing some slowdowns there. Wage growth only 3.7%, so barely above inflation. The Fed notes low hiring plus low layoffs, meaning a labor market that is near what they like to call maximum employment. And then some signs of softening or weaker demand, higher youth and Black unemployment, softer wage growth for job switchers. So, and that ties in with our topic, right, Bailey? And that is, don't expect to get a raise if you lose your job, especially later in life, and you go to another company. I've got some stats for you that are going to show that you're probably going to take a fairly severe wage cut, unfortunately.
Absolutely.
All right, so let's get down to this topic because, again, very important. So if you just joined us, once again, we're gonna spend the rest of the show talking about what happens in life if we are older, we're in our 50s, we're in our 60s, and unexpectedly we lose our job. Maybe you screwed up, you got fired. Maybe, again, AI took your job. maybe your company's facing difficult times, or as we're seeing all over, Bailey, right? With technology, especially, you deal with this as tech savvy as you are. Companies are just going, we don't need those 300 people in the call center because we got AI that can do it, right? So technology has
Absolutely.
taken so many jobs, not just
Yep.
AI, but just technology in general.
Yep. Absolutely. I've been guilty of it too, seeing where I can replace bodies with technology to save money, as much as I hate to admit it, but it's the world we live in now, and it's just a changing of the times that we have to get used to.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, so I want to kind of start this discussion off, Bailey, with some stats that I think, are really something that we need to pay a lot of attention to, because again, as I'd mentioned just a second ago, the numbers aren't real good if unfortunately you lose your job later in life. And I'd say, remember the premise of what's different of, I'm just going to use this term, my generation versus yours. We have a lot more financial responsibilities, right? We have mortgages, we have kids that we're raising. We may be the sandwich generation, meaning we're not only taking care of our kids, but we're taking care of our parents, and so on and so forth. So here's the first stat to keep in mind. Among people aged 50 to 65, 4% were laid off more than once. 14% were laid off once. Among those that were laid off at least once between age 50 and 65, here's the scary stat: 4% did not find a new job. Almost a 1/4% of people laid off 50 to 65 did not find a new job.
If that doesn't make you rethink your plan for your future,
You got
I
it.
know what will.
That's right. That's right. And that's according to the Center for Retirement Research at Boston College. This fellow by the name of Kevin Cahill, he's an economist for FTI Consulting. He said older career workers who find new jobs take a 11% wage cut on average. 11% wage cut. So think about that. If you're making 100 grand, now you're, making 89,000. That is absolutely significant. He said the pay cut for men on average was 15%. And this was interesting. The pay cut for women was only 7%.
Interesting.
Isn't
Why do
that
you think
interesting? Yeah, I've sat there and I've racked my brain trying to figure out why that would be, but I cannot come up with an answer on that. Maybe we'll try to get him on. Older workers' employment histories from age 50 to 62, exclusively in jobs with benefits, 26%, mostly in jobs with benefits, 26%, 21% are taking early retirement when they lose their jobs. I can go on that. I think those are the main stats that I wanted to mention. But the bottom line is, the one that got me is 24% of people in that age group, 50 to 65, cannot find a job.
Right.
You know,
And you think about it too, again, as we kind of touched on, people of that generation find one job, they stick with it forever. Why ever try to learn something else
right.
if they think they have a sure future where they're
Yep.
at?
Yep. Well, I'll disclose this. Bailey and I sometimes butt heads, which we've
Don't
done
say.
her whole life when it comes to technology. And I mean, again, I pride myself that I'm pretty technology savvy. I'm not as good as you, and I'm definitely not as good as Jason. But I get mad at you, both of you, and you guys go, "Oh, just do this," and I'm like, "Whoa, slow down! I didn't know that even existed. How do I do it? I need more." So us older generation, we're not as tech savvy as you, right? If I go to apply for a job at, whatever place that I have to show my technological skills, you'll outshine me being 28 years old. It's just the way we've grown up, right?
Do you find this being an issue with clients who come in and potentially have faced the same issue of maybe losing their job? Do they come to you and say, obviously, one, help me with my financial
Yes.
strategy, but two, how do I start on a plan with learning what I need to these days to get a job? Technology, marketing, everything that
Absolutely.
goes with it.
You bet. Because again, they've been so, I'll use the term, cocooned in their job, right? They've been there 20, 30, 25, 30 years, whatever it is. They don't really know what goes on in the rest of the world. So yes, you have to sit down in it. Bailey, that's a great question. I liken it to all the discussions you and I have had as you grew up, and your siblings and things, which is, okay, what's your skill set? What's your passion? What do you want to do? Quote, and I've used this term, what do you want to do, Mr. Client, when you grow up? And here I'm telling this to a 60-year-old man or a woman, but that's really what it is. If they're positioned, and if they're in a industry that, it's not like they can go from the company they're in, they were in, that they just lost their job, to a competitor. A lot of times that position in the industry, that industry just doesn't exist, or it's in the decline. So they've got to retool themselves. They, just like a college graduate, it's like, here's my strengths. I need to brush up my resume. And we're going to get into this, some of the challenges this generation faces, but it is very hard when you tell someone that, again, been successful, they're managers, maybe they're in the C-suite, right? On and on and on. And it's like, all of a sudden they're out of a job, and we're going to get into the psychological side, especially for us men, because it's devastating. It is
Right.
absolutely devastating. You have so many things, the financial, the emotional. So yeah, but we're going to try to prepare everybody and again, give you some solutions on that. In the meantime, let's turn it over to Jack Saban. Welcome him back. Jack, welcome back, my friend. Welcome back to the Jon Sanchez Show on News Talk 780 KOH. Jason is hard at work in the office, so I've asked my daughter Bailey, our marketing manager, to join us. Once again, we finished up 16 on the Dow, lost 142 on the NASDAQ, and a decline of 16 on the S&P 500. A wild ride once again. But now we're going to get into something that we're concerned with, the Fed is concerned with. So we thought maybe a few of you may be concerned with it, and that is, what do you do if you lose your job late in your career? So our discussion is going to be focusing on those of you that are 50 plus, that at some point, hope it happens to none of you. But if it does, and most likely it will to a handful of you, how do you handle a job loss again later in life? And again, Bailey's going to be kind of doing some comparisons as to her generation at 28 years old when they lose their job compared to those of us in the 50s and 60s and what happens. So what I've done is I've put together, Bailey, a list of what I feel are basically 9 different things that I think all of you need to be thinking about. And the first one pains me to say this, it really does, but it is the fact of life. And the first challenge that you're going to face losing your job later in life is age discrimination and reemployment. You see, many employers hesitate to hire older workers. They fear higher costs, higher insurance premiums, shorter tenure. It's like, hey, I need to get this old dog, trained, but it's going to take me 3 years to get him trained. That's probably about when he or she's going to retire. So we have to get into reskilling and pivoting our career to something that I recommend a lot of times to my clients. We have I think of 3 of them that we've done this with, and that is coming in as a consultant, right? Coming in as a consultant. Now, let me explain that one, Bailey, just a little bit closer. So in both of these situations, these gentlemen are exactly this demographic we're talking about. One gentleman, he wanted a raise, been with the company forever. They said no. He said, how about I become a 1099 employee? They said, great. Because remember, folks, 99, the employer doesn't pay the payroll taxes, the workers' comp, they're not contributing to the retirement account. The employee loves it. Now they're an independent contractor. They still have the stability, per se, of a steady paycheck coming in, but now they're responsible for their own taxes. We help them set up much better retirement plans than what a traditional 401k can do. There's a lot of benefits to that. But once again, Bailey, the hard part is that reskilling, right? If they can't come back to that same industry, they have to reskill themselves.
And with the theme that we're talking about being technology, if I had to sit down and expect you to be trained within a week on all new technology that you've never worked with, I think I would likely turn you down as a potential employee, because that just takes way more time and money out of myself and my other employees who are already trained, as horrible as it sounds.
Well, something else, Bailey, that's interesting is your generation, thank goodness, is probably, I've said this to you many times when you've been on the show, probably the most entrepreneurial oriented generation that I've ever seen. I thought the baby boomers, my generation, were, but you guys, because you have, again, Chat GPT, you can have a business up and running literally in an hour. So you guys are very, very entrepreneurial focused, which means you're going to hire people your own age, maybe a little younger, maybe a little bit older, but an old guy like myself, I'm the last one you're going to hire, because you're going to go, this dude ain't gonna ever figure out how to use TikTok and do all the different things, right? We hire people like you to do that for our businesses. So that's a big challenge for us.
And that's got to, not to jump the gun, but maybe tie into the emotional aspect when they come sit down in front of you and say, I've lost my whole identity. I was district manager for the last 20 years. I was the go-to guy. And now I can't even get a 28-year-old to hire me. How does that play out?
That's right. And we're going to talk about the psychological side of it. And that is an absolute fact. So does age discrimination apply? Absolutely, it does. Of course, a company will never tell you they're not going to hire you because you're too old, but I see it all the time with our clients. All right, our second challenge, losing our job later in life, the healthcare coverage gap. Bailey, one of the biggest things that I see when we run or have our dear friend Blaine Gale run healthcare quotes for clients that have lost their jobs. So remember, at age 65, that's when Medicare is going to kick in, right? So you don't need to, of course, you're going to go buy a supplemental policy, but majority of your healthcare is going to be covered by the government for a very small cost out of your pocket. But what happens again, you're in that 50s or below 65 and you got to go get coverage. I always make sure the clients are sitting down in a chair before I tell them what the quote comes in at, because it's mind boggling. I mean, $1,600 to $2,000 a month is very, very common for a husband and wife or a couple to go out and buy their own private insurance. I mean, you're talking, basically a mortgage payment or, a good chunk of a mortgage payment all to go out. So ask me, Bailey, what do you do, Dad, to curb that problem?
Absolutely. And I'm going to here in 1 second. And just on my side of things, from the young business owner, I remember when I had my clothing store and I looked into getting employees. But of course, I knew that was an aspect of it. And as soon as I saw it was that expensive, I thought, I
Yeah.
think I can work a few more hours myself
Yes.
versus hiring
That
someone and
happens a
paying for
lot.
that. So what do you tell your clients when they come to you and you give them that price?
Well, we're going to go into more detail, but I'll let the cat out of the bag. And that is, I will try to, again, convince them or help them try to convince their employer or former employer, if it's possible, to bring them on as a 1099. Why? Because then we can help them establish usually an LLC. Now they're self-employed. Guess what? That insurance premium that they're paying, that $1,600 to $2,000, now it's going to be tax deductible. Check with your CPA, but your healthcare benefits are tax deductible. Your long-term care, if you have long-term care insurance, that's tax deductible. In many cases, your life insurance is now tax deductible, all because you're a business owner. So that is one way to solve it. The other one too is you have to really understand the rules. I'm going to be real general, but in most cases, 2 employees or more are classified as a group. Well, let me tell you, folks, get a group quote. Again, 2 or more people, and compare it to what you were just going to get as you and your wife. Mind-boggling the difference.
Is it?
So many benefits of having that business, but that's really the only way. There's nothing we can do about getting the rates other than, again, a group's going to be lower. 2 people, remember, or more is considered a group. So what do? You bring on a spouse, or maybe you employ one of your kids. Whatever you do, you just need 2 or more people. Now it's a group rate. It's going to be lower, tax deductible.
Let's look at it in a just short brief. Let's look at the stressor too of looking at somebody at 60 years old who's never had to start a business, and you say, hey, now you got to walk through how to start an LLC. Even though it's not hard, like you said, it could be done within an hour. I think I've accomplished maybe 20 minutes before, but also the emotional stress of that as well.
And that's one of the services we help our clients with. I'm on the phone with them, and yeah, we go and we get it set up, and like you said, no time at all. So that's another big challenge, the healthcare coverage gap. And don't forget, folks, you do have COBRA. Remember, COBRA, the rule is your employer has to offer you COBRA for a period of 18 months after you lose your job. I've seen where it's dramatically dramatically more expensive than what you were paying as when you were employed. And I've seen it where it's a little bit cheaper because they cut back some of the benefits. So last resort, you always want to find out, on your way out the door, what are my COBRA benefits? And again, that's something you're going to have to pay out of your pocket. Now, number 3, what happens now as far as our challenges? The retirement savings risk. Job loss interrupts your 401k contributions. It interrupts what you're saving in your 401k. It interrupts and stops any employer matches, profit sharing, all the benefits you have of a 401k, especially if you're with a bigger company. Remember the rules, folks. You can take money out of your 401k in hardship, meaning you avoid the 10% penalty if you're under 59 and a half. Hardship would be a job loss. So that'll save you a little bit. Confer with your financial advisor and your tax professional. But you know what, Bailey? Reality sets in. I can't tell you how many times over my career I've had to tell clients, take it out, right? You have a mortgage due, you have a car payment, you got to put food on the table. Who gives a damn if you got to pay a 10% penalty, right? We can show you some ways to minimize that down the road. But the bottom line is you got to tap your 401k. I've done it so many times, Bailey, where clients or a prospect will come to us. They'll tell me this situation, they've lost their job. What do I do? I'm like, okay, last thing you want to do not take a distribution out of that 401k while you are still there, because they will have to withhold 20% of your payment, send it to the IRS as a future tax payment. So number 1, get a hold of someone like ourselves. We open up an IRA rollover. The money comes out of the 401k into the IRA. Non-taxable event, no 20% withholding. Again, under 59 and a half, take the money out. I've had it where people bring it over, we lose money on the deal, but I don't care. We're helping people, and they take their 401k out because they got to go live off of it, right? There's no job prospects. So that is always something you can do. Remember, if you have a loan on that 401k, when you lose your job, if you're probably going to default on it, some companies will allow you to continue paying. Obviously it's after tax, but a lot of companies will say you got X amount of days to pay off that loan or it goes into default. It doesn't hurt your credit, but it could be taxable and maybe a 10% penalty. That retirement savings, and especially if the job loss, Bailey, lasts a long period of time, as you know, you've done an incredible job saving in your 401k. Just missing a few months, right, can relate to thousands, especially if they're younger, sometimes hundreds of thousands, right? That compounding effect of money over the next 20 years. So that is the reality of it. We'll hit the Social Security side of it when we come back. Let's wrap it up with Kristen Snow. She's in the Right Now Traffic Center. Hello. Welcome back to the Jon Sanchez Show on News Talk 780 KOH. Been joined by my daughter, Bailey. I always have so much fun with you.
Yeah,
We
me
got to
too,
do this
Dad.
more often. Love having you on
I
here.
agree.
Absolutely. Well, listen, if Jason and I and the rest of the team can be of any service to you in regards to, if you have a job loss, you're thinking about it or something, by all means, call our office at 775-800-1801 or online at sanchezgaunt.com. But Bailey, you brought up a great idea because, we're not even going to get to our fourth point. So we're going to continue this on Friday, but you brought up a great idea and I'm going to let you describe it to the audience.
I think this would be a topic that would be great for a future webinar,
Yeah,
to be
I think you're
honest
right.
with you. I think lay out these step-by-step plans, because even if you're not in this situation right now, it's great to at least have a plan in place slightly, because you may be thinking in the back of your head, hey, this sounds like my job could potentially be at risk in the future. It may not be now, but it may be in a few years.
Or a friend or a family member.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I think having a webinar would be absolutely fantastic.
Okay. I like that idea. So yeah, if we do that, I tell you what, let's throw it in your hands, right? We're going to do that. We do the webinar for you. What, you want them to send an email at office@sanchezgaunt.com and just say,
Yeah,
I'm interested in a webinar. And we'll add them to a database and then get a date set here in the next month or so.
absolutely.
Okay.
Shoot us your name, shoot us your spouse's name if you think they'd be interested, even a friend. Let's take your email, and then that way we can get this set up for folks. Because again, it's better to have a plan in place than to be scurrying
Absolutely.
around and scared of what's going to happen next when you
Yeah.
just
No, I
lost your
love that
job.
idea. I'd love to be able to teach this. Love to be able to teach
Absolutely.
this.
Yeah. So shoot us an email at office@sanchezgaunt.com with your name, and we'll get you on a list and keep you updated.
Yep. Gonna get a pool going for those that want to join. Perfect.
Absolutely.
Anything else you want to wrap up with?
Well, I think just from my perspective, it's really a good reminder that we need to start planning, even at 28 years old. Start planning ahead for our future. Make sure you're well-rounded in what you're good at, what you know, and just keep it in the back of your head. And remind your friends too. You have a responsibility to be financially smart and always have a plan in place.
Yeah, absolutely. And folks, again, I've gone through, I can't tell you how many hundreds, if not thousands of these in real life. And Bailey was asking me during the break, what's your one piece of advice for someone that loses their job later in life? Here's my best piece of advice. Whether it's us or anybody, sit down with a professional, take a deep breath, talk it out with somebody, because it is beyond the scope that most people can handle by themselves. Bailey, your world has collapsed. You feel like a piece of crap because you just lost your job. You can't provide for your family. Your world literally is spinning around. And I've had grown men cry in my office when I've just sat down and said, you know what? We're going to make this work. We're going to have a plan. And I promise you, I can make a plan. Jason can make a plan for any situation that is out there. It's not the end of the world. And where I've really had great success is taking people that walked in and going, my world just came collapsing down on me. And they walk out, quote, skipping because we came up with new ideas. It's like, I always wanted to start a business, or I always wanted to jump to another career. Great. Let's make it happen. There is no better time, folks, no better time in history to start a business or redo your skills and get into something you really want to do, right? God puts these challenges in front of us. It's all a matter of how we look at them and adapt to them. So great topic. We'll continue it on Friday. Thank you, honey. I love you.
Thanks so much. I love you.
This has been a great time. Enjoyed it. We'll do it again tomorrow on the Jon Sanchez Show. God bless.